Russian forces have seized virtually all of Soledar. What does this mean for Bakhmut, and how can Ukraine stabilize its lines? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is January 8th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, when we look at the control map, you guys can see that there has been significant gains in and around Soledar. We can see here that if we look just a few days ago, Soledar, the Russian forces were on the outskirts of Soledar, and you can see that they have persisted in pushing into the city and the surrounding area. There's been a small movement of Ukrainian forces pushing back, especially around this plant right here. But this is still a significant problem for Ukrainian forces. We've discussed that these urban areas, Soledar, Blahodatne, and Krasnohora, are key to controlling the northern suburbs of Bakhmut itself. And so it seems like Russia has pivoted towards focusing on these instead of repeatedly trying to frontally assault Bakhmut itself. That said, Russia has a strong foothold within Soledar, and it has momentum on its side. Momentum is, of course, the idea that once you've achieved a breakthrough, you don't want to give the enemy time to reconsolidate their forces and reestablish strong defensive positions. This is more or less what Ukraine needs to do right now. It needs to draw a line in the sand and create an environment in which it's going to be much harder for Russian forces to advance, to dig out the defenders. This is probably one of the core problems, is that this part of Soledar, right, as of just a few days ago, really, I mean, this is the view on the second. So you can see just 6 days ago, Soledar was not on the front lines, and now it very quickly is a frontline area. And supposedly Russian forces, according to WarMapper, have actually continued to make advances. You can see here, this has them as being stopped at the plant here. But WarMapper is reporting that around 65% of Soledar is actually held by Russia at this time, as of this morning. So this is has the potential to become a grave problem for Ukraine. How will they stabilize it? Well, their best bet, as we talked about, is to create a more stable line of defense, and probably around Blahodatne, though territorially this all looks pretty tough, simply because what they're trying to protect is to the south. Krasnohora and the suburb next to it. This might be a good natural barrier. You guys can see that there's a lot of no man's land, but it's also a problem, right? Rivers, when you see a river, you can be sure it's low ground, it's low territory. And this poses its own set of problems because, of course, you want to be in the elevated area. And generally, right, we know these rivers flow into larger bodies of water to the south. So these represent heights, and this is going to represent the lower ground. So what you want to do is make sure possibly to turn this into a strong point, this urban area here, and probably also this Blahodatne region or even Krasnohora. Dig these into strong points. Don't give the Russians not just the elevated positions if you can avoid it, but potentially make them cross large open areas where their troops will be significantly vulnerable. We've talked again. I think it's important to keep perspective. We've discussed that Bakhmut itself does not have a ton of strategic value, and while Russia really needs a symbolic victory, and we should do our best to deny them that, the reality is that this whole situation does not really open up anything larger. Just bear in mind that even the entirety of the Bakhmut front is a fraction of the liberated territory in the Kharkiv offensive. It's even a fraction of the territory that was liberated when Russia withdrew from Kherson. all this to say that I maintain that that Russia controlling Bakhmut was maybe not a foregone conclusion, but a highly likely outcome. And that the idea was to force Russia to burn a lot of their most valuable men and material in fighting for Bakhmut, so that when Ukraine launches its own offensive, they simply don't have the top tier of troop necessary to make this happen. So I want to bear in mind that even if what we're seeing is operationally or tactically a defeat or withdrawal from Ukraine, it's tough to argue that Russia would achieve any sort of strategic gain from taking Bakhmut. There's some argument. There was a time when it would have put Seversk in danger, but you can see Ukraine controls all the way north of Seversk, all the way along this line of contact here. So I think it's important to keep the strategic perspective. It's very easy to start a battle. This is the famous problem of Gallipoli, where it started as a battle in which there was an expectation that the British naval fleet would use its most outdated ships in order to break the Dardanelles. And then slowly but surely, the idea of actually losing ships seemed so unacceptable to the British, even though everyone understood at the beginning of the operation that there would be significant losses among these aging warships. But when it actually came time to lose the warships, everyone lost their nerve and decided instead to force the army to fight to clear it. It became something that was supposed to be a low-stakes operation. And when it came time to actually bid out, everyone lost their nerve. And I think it's important that Ukrainian command not fall into the same trap. It won't feel great to lose Bakhmut if that's what happens, but the most important thing that needs to happen in Bakhmut is Russian forces and their Russian forces and Russian weapons need to be destroyed en masse. And even if not another Russian casualty happens, I think it's fair to say that has certainly occurred in Bakhmut. But again, we're also a long way from that happening. You guys can see there's a large number of very, very robust supply lines leading into Bakhmut that Ukraine will easily be able to keep those troops supplied and fighting, even if Russia makes considerably more advances. So we're a long way from a resolution. This is probably a sign of Russia pivoting its strategy. And, I won't deny this is Russia advancing, but it's important to keep the larger war in perspective. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Of course, as always, if you want access to the uncensored combat videos, the kind YouTube definitely doesn't let me show you anymore, you want to become a member of the Patreon. Thanks so much, my Lieutenant tier patrons. We had a new video drop on Friday. We saw some helmet cam from the Azov battalion. We saw some tanks clearing a trench with an unconventional method. It was a fun time and some wild videos. Anyway, see you guys in the next one.